little chilly for the window to be open that long, but wanted to give everyone a little bit of a road tour here on some of the day-to-day stuff. Driving back here on Knik River Road is the name of it. This is the same valley where recorded last year over at the Knik Glacier. It is record low snowfall, little to none, as you can see. I mean, what you see on the trees is more of a flocking from, freezing fog versus snowfall. Still, it's beautiful. However, we should be driving down a small canyon of snow here, but weather manipulation, all that other stuff, yeah. And yeah, it's a fucking beautiful area. Beautiful area. Heading out here to check on one of my buddies, and figured I'd get some footage of the area. It is amazingly beautiful, and this video will serve it no justice, I promise that. This little hill, the perspective of the camera won't truly show how freaking scary it can be when it's glare ice, but it's definitely a pucker factor in icy conditions. Right now you can see all the sand and gravel spread on the road, but it opens back up here into the valley after you come across there. As you can see, just beautiful out here, man, just beautiful. Haven't seen as much moose as you normally do throughout the season, but with very little snowfall, they're not pushed down out of the mountains. And my buddy, his house out here, he can actually see the Knik Glacier from it, which is cool. But he owns a business, and I'm not going to record there. But anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit of that with y'all, and I'll catch y'all down the road here. Hey, greetings. Thanks for joining me today. I was hoping to make it out to like Knik River Valley or something like that, but unfortunately, weather, and it warmed up enough to where it was starting to rain, and just didn't make it very appealing. Anyway, what I wanted to share with you today, this comes from, we'll name him Bruce, okay? So Bruce and his brother, we'll name him David. So Bruce and David, they were at their grandfather's cabin. Now, this particular cabin is on the Nushagak River, okay, back home. We'll leave it at that. And this happened about 25 years ago, okay? Now, Bruce and David were doing some repairs at this cabin after their up had passed away. And over the course of this summer, the first few trips, they were bringing some materials, wood materials and stuff, just fixing, patching things up. There's a hole in the roof, and just, it was just in the... it was not taken care of in a while, and so it was, a little disheveled, little TLC needed, nothing too major. So there, over the course of the summer, they took a break for the salmon season. At the end of the salmon season, they wanted to hunt from that cabin like they grew up doing, so they figured we'll go up there early prior to hunting, and we'll get everything situated. So they ended up bringing a new wood burning stove up. The other one just kind of rusted out and just used up, just stuff like that. And they were using 55-gallon drum like they would in the steam bath, in the maqay. So they get all this done, and they were just getting settled in. It was still a week out before the hunting season started, so that what they were doing is getting up real early and just kind of perusing, just going up and down the river, just checking out some spots, see where maybe they would want to, pick a spot, hopefully moose around, that type of thing, just scouting the area basically. And so this one particular morning, they get up to do that. And again, it was about a week out from hunting, he said. And Bruce said, David was running the skiff, and they went up to where Jim Slough, right? Which is up above Portage on the Nushagak there. So they go up there, and they kind of threw the anchor and just was sitting there, just kind of relaxing, really. And as they were kind of discussing, the years past of hunting and all that kind of stuff, they hear this, what Bruce described as this wallowing, kind of like, it was like a moaning, kind of not necessarily a scream, but like just this real loud, pronounced, just like something sorrowful, something very painful sounding, like something large was in pain, emotional pain. Freaked him out because, moose don't do that, and bears sure as hell don't. So they pulled the anchor and kind of were drifting away. And across the river from Jim Slough there, which I've been to that area, there's crazy shit happens around there. But anyway, as they were drifting, they were looking across the river because the sound sounded like it was coming from that side. And the cabin of their grandpa's is on that side of the river as well. So they were like, what the hell is that? So they powered up, went across, and then were drifting down on the opposite bank and listening for this sound. And at the time they had, of course they've heard of the hairy man and stuff like that, these are some Athabascans, but it wasn't anything that was in their wheelhouse as far as these noises. So they were like, what the hell is that? And so they pulled up to the riverbank, just a little bit down from Jim Slough's side, and they stuck the anchor in the ground and were kind of just sitting there listening, trying to figure out what it was. Bruce said he was holding his rifle, and David jumped up onto the bank and was just kind of looking around, and Bruce said, don't go too far, I don't want to have to come find you, that kind of thing. And David just kind of shined him on, like, whatever. Well, he walks off out of sight from the riverbank from Bruce's perspective, and all of a sudden, he said it wasn't even 2 minutes, he yelled, hey, what's going on? He heard some thrashing off in the distance, and here comes David sliding off the riverbank. He fell into the water just in front of the skiff and then jumped up and pulled himself up over the bow on the Lund, right? And he's pulling and getting the anchor, and he was like, go, 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 go. So Bruce fires up the motor, and he has to push off because the way the water is pushing him, it's just kind of, he's got the outboard running, but it's not in gear because it kind of pushed the outboard back into the, the muddy bank there. So he pushes off, and then they get turned around, they're facing downriver, and, Bruce gives it some gas, and they get up on the step. And David is down low in the skiff, and he's got his gun out of his bag, out of the gun bag. And he keeps looking back past Bruce, and Bruce just every once in a while stops. He's like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? And, David's just like, go, go, go. So he keeps going, and, they got a little bit of a distance before they get to the cabin or whatever, and they come up on it's basically a bunch of little islands that were created by the ice when it comes and goes, in the spring. And so they stop at the first one they come up to, which is real thick with brush that time of year, all around it. But they pull off in there, and because David's like, I got to use the bathroom bad, so he gets up on the riverbank, or up onto the bank there on this little island, and walks back a little ways, and Bruce hears David throwing up. And he's like, hey, what's going on? And he goes, you didn't see it? You didn't see it? And then, he finishes, what he was doing, comes back to the skiff, and is like, you didn't see it? And Bruce was like, see what? I heard some thrashing, but all I saw was you slide off the riverbank into the water, jump back into the freaking skiff like that. It was all happened so fast. And then say, go, go, go. And he goes, well, it was a hairy man back there. And he was like, hairy man? And he goes, what was it doing? He goes, David said, I don't know, but it started coming towards me, so it freaked me out, and I ran. And so he was like, okay, well, we're good. And, he looks back upriver and doesn't see anything, so they continue on their way. They go back to the cabin, and all this happened before noon, because they left early, they went up, they scouted around a little bit, and they just happened to just drop anchor at Jim Slough there. Well, from what Bruce said, when they were back at the cabin, when they got back to the cabin, everything felt weird. The energy felt really, really weird. And there was some relatives of his a little further down around the bend a little ways. They had a cabin there, and he heard activity, a skiff and whatnot. So Bruce decided, hey, tells David, I'm gonna go and say hi to the relatives or whatever. And David's like, yeah, just don't be gone too long, and what have you. So Bruce leaves in the skiff and goes downriver a little ways to go visit with the relatives. There was a cousin that had showed up to get their cabin ready for moose hunting, And so he talks to him a little bit, and Bruce said as he was talking to his cousin, probably about 20 minutes, half hour or so, all of a sudden he hears gunshots from coming back from up at their cabin. It's like, holy shit. So he takes off, and his cousin follows him. They pull up, he jumps off, he ties off and everything, and he hears yelling inside the cabin, and he's like, hey, David, it's Bruce, I'm out here, don't shoot. Well, we're out here. He said, it was on the roof. And so they're looking around, and they're like trying to figure out what, right? Well, the cousin goes around one side, and Bruce goes along the riverbank side to cut around that back side. He said when he came around the corner, he saw something dark moving off into the brush, right? Because the trees came almost right up to the cabin at that point. The cousin saw this thing moving off and saw it swaying an arm and gave a little bit of a, it had brownish, reddish brown hair, and it was just moving away. He saw its arm sway. He didn't get a good look at the face, but he could see the figure of it was humanoid, Cousin comes back yelling, hey, it's fucking hairy, man, blah, blah, blah. Let's get out of here. And David inside, he comes out because there's, two more people now. And he's like, yeah, let's go. And Bruce is like, well, wait a minute, let's not just run off here. This is our cabin kind of thing. And David wanted no part of it. He didn't want to stay. The cousin was like, hey, I don't want that thing following me back to my cabin and starting trouble there. I'm going to leave. You guys be careful. I would leave too if I was you guys. And he jumped in his skiff and he went back to finish doing what he was doing downriver. So Bruce is telling David, hey, let's just hold our ground. Did you shoot it? And David said, no, I was just shooting to try to scare it off. He goes, okay, well, you didn't shoot it, so it really has no reason to be mad at us, right? Let's just, let's keep calm. Let's not just overreact, because, in essence, they live there. That's their place now, and Bruce wasn't willing to just give it up like that. And which I understand. I say shoot them all, fuck it. But anyway, that's just my own personal views. So David calms down, and they relax a little bit. They had some vodka with them, so they had some mixed drinks and whatnot, and they relaxed. And Bruce was just livening up the energy from being so dreary and David so paranoid about talking about old funny stuff they had enjoyed right there where they were, and pointing out, hey, we never had issues here. This is just, let's not make this what it's about, because remember all the times with Uppa and all this and that, winter caribou hunt, they'd park their snow machines there, and it was just a base camp, with tons of family memories. So they just enjoy themselves, drinking that 100 proof Smirnoff. Ugh, been there, done that. But so it gets on into dusk, and they decide they're going to bring in some more firewood from outside because it's starting to drizzle and starting to rain. It kind of got socked in and was getting a little chilly, especially on the river, man. It gets chilly. So they go out and they're bringing in from the little kind of it's more of like a lean-to Arctic entry. It wasn't fully enclosed, but they're bringing in firewood from there, and they brought in some good, good stack, just so they had some extra for the next day if it was real cold the next morning. And they left the door kind of kicked open just a little bit to let fresh air in, because David and Bruce were basically chain smoking while they were drinking, right? And they had their firearms nearby, and from what Bruce was saying, it was all, like, the energy was much better. It wasn't as heavy. You know, they were joking, chopping it up, just having a good time, talking about the old days and, you know, relatives that had since passed, but the good times they had with them and stuff like that. And, you know, berry picking in the area and just all sorts of stuff. And they were in the midst of this conversation when all of a sudden that door flings open hard, just bam, so hard it almost popped off, you know, the hinges and stuff, right? I mean, it just real hard. And there was no wind. And so they immediately jump up, they each grab their guns, and they're like, what the hell? And again, this is just getting into dark, not fully dark yet, right, in the fall. So they grabbed the flashlights they had. They were modern for the time. You know, they worked decent enough, and they go out, and they're looking on the ground for tracks, and there was none. And they're both kind of looking around the corner to the tree side and then around the corner to the riverbank side, and they're not seeing anything. And so they walk straight away from the cabin a little ways together, turn around and face back towards the cabin to make sure it's not back up on the roof, right? Because David had heard it on the roof earlier. That's what got him shooting. Bruce said that when they were looking back, they noticed eye shine like towards the farther, you know, the back side of the cabin from where they were standing, and they noticed the eye shine duck down once the light hit, right? The eye shine went away. And so they decided they're going to take that tree side and walk along the cabin back towards that direction and keep an eye out on this thing, or look for it, and potentially if opportunity, maybe just shoot the damn thing, right? He said as they were going along, David was about 2 paces behind him, just kind of steady, keeping his rifle up and you know, kind of glancing back and forth. And Bruce was like, hey, don't get excited and accidentally shoot me, damn it, you know. And he's like, no, I'm keeping my rifle up, you keep yours straight, you know, I won't let mine, you know, come down below the, you know, aiming at the roof line. Now, this roof isn't overly high. You know, it's about maybe 6.5 feet off the ground is, you know, the eave, the drip edge. And so as they're going along, they're not that, like, far away from the drip edge. The drip edge is, like, literally above their heads, maybe off a foot or two. They weren't quite far enough over to look straight up at the angle of the roof, right? And so, because of the trees and everything, they didn't have that open kind of, you know, they couldn't just take another step over and easily be able to see up there. So they go along, and all of a sudden they hear a noise, and then they hear trees rustle, crash. And so they immediately, their attention goes there. And as Bruce is pointing his flashlight and rifle in that direction, they hear a growl that startles them both. As soon as they heard the growl, Bruce said he passed David, who was already hauling ass trying to get, I don't mean to laugh, I giggled with Bruce at this point, because when he brought it up, he said that they both hit that front door at the same time and like stopped each other, like Three Stooges type shit, you know, boom, and they both fell down, jumped up, and then, you know, went in. But just the visual of that was just funny. But anyway, so they shut the door. They, you know, put some stuff to barricade and whatnot, and at that point, they got out the Coleman lanterns, right? Up until then, they were using the ambient light coming in the window, which there's no curtains on the windows. There was one on the riverbank side that was a good-sized one that had been basically put in by hand. It was an old, from the old school, one of the old schools that used to be in downtown Dillingham that was transformed or, you know, changed into the basically City Hall now. But back in the day, that window came from there, right? So they got the lanterns going, and they're looking out that window. There was also a smaller window that was about 1.5 feet squared, right? Just a smaller window. It was a single pane, and it was between where the wood stove was, a short little bit of a counter. There was an old stove, like propane maybe, that used to be there that was no longer there, so it's kind of like a gap in the counter. And then there's a board across it, you know, just to kind of extend the countertop, and it was just above that. There was no makeshift sink. It was all, they would take water in buckets and do it like that, as far as dishes, you know. So they're kind of keeping an eye on that big window. and they're not really thinking about this smaller one, because it's right behind them. They're kind of on that side of the cabin with a little bit of distance between them and that big window. And at the time, they didn't have anything to cover it, so they basically, let's just keep an eye on it. They got the door off to their right and then the window in front of them, and they weren't thinking about this window like less than 3 feet behind them, right? So as they're sitting there, they're still enjoying drinks, but not enjoying them. It's more like taking some shots to stop shaking. It was because that growl, they both, in discussing it, once they went back inside and everything, they felt it reverberate through their bodies. They felt their insides jiggle, and that's not a good feeling. So as they're sitting there discussing, hey, what do we do if, and they're kind of getting a game plan on, if this happens, we'll do this, if this happens, we'll do that. If it comes through the door at us, we'll jump out the window. Yeah, they're kind of just lining up a game plan, because initially they wanted to leave in the skiff, but in the dark it's so dangerous, and they had lost relatives previously to such things, skiffing at the wrong time. So they were weighing their options. Should we just maybe drift down a ways to their cousin's cabin, because his cousins should be there? And so they decided, what, we should do that. We can just drift down, and we know the channel enough to where once we see the lights on in their cabin, we could just fire up, and they know the riverbank enough to know where to pull up and not, bottom out or anything like that. So they decide that's what they're going to do. So they gather up the stuff they're going to need. Bruce grabs another box of ammo, and so did David. And they were just getting ready to start putting out the lanterns. They had 3 of them going, and they put out 2, and they were going to keep 1 to use to see going back down to the riverbank. Just keep 1 for going just cause, and use their flashlights. But before they went out the door, as they were standing there facing that large window, and they had just put out 2 of the lanterns, all of a sudden that window behind them shatters, like startling the hell out of them. And a piece of birch, it had to have been, from what Bruce said, like at least 15 feet long, comes like pushing through, like shatters and pushes through, and just goes right between them both to where the little table they were drinking at, it was hopped up on that, and then it ran outside, right? And it was dark outside already, so they couldn't, see the end of it, but they both turned around, and there's this, the birches standing, right between them. And they're like, holy shit, because it was so fast, it was so violent, how quickly, and it went right between them both, so they didn't know if this thing was trying to spear one of them with it or whatever. They didn't know. And as they're kind of looking at it like, what the hell, they went to the opposite side of the table, looking back, shining their flashlight out, and they saw movement. And Bruce took a shot out the window that's now broken, and he actually hit the birch, right? And it kind of, made an impact and kind of splintered a little bit when it busted through or whatever. And they start yelling, hey, get out of here, get out of here. And all of a sudden that piece of birch gets yanked back out. Bruce said very violently. He said the last about maybe 4 feet of it was caught, like it had been pulled out and then turned before it had enough time to clear the window, and it kind of caught about 4 feet of it and then broke, and then it flopped out the rest of the way, right? Bruce said at that point they said, fuck this, we're getting the hell out of here. And they gather up their stuff, they condensed the stuff into one bag, and Bruce put that on, little backpack style. It was actually a small duffel bag. He just put his arms through the loops, the handles, and makeshift backpack out of that. And David was making sure that he had his magazine full for his rifle. David was using a 270, and Bruce had a 300 Win Mag. They were, making sure everyone was full up on ammo. Bruce replaced the round he had shot into the birch, and David just kept looking out that window. And Bruce was like, hey, snap out of it. Let's get to the skiff. We'll drift down. And David was like, I'm scared to go outside. And Bruce totally understood why. I mean, the growl, then this freaking javelin basically comes crashing through and then ripped back out. He said there was noises going on outside, but they were so terrified in the moment he couldn't say exactly what they were. He said he vaguely remembers some growling, but there's also other noises being made. Nothing, concrete that he could discern in the moment. So David was like, what if we fire our rifles and maybe our cousin will come up here? And Bruce is like, there's two of us, there's one of him. That would be unfair to draw him up into something. Maybe, he could get hurt. Let's just go to the skiff. We'll drift down, It was less than a mile, downriver. And so after discussing it a minute, David said, okay, let me go first. You carry the lantern. I'll have my rifle with the flashlight ready and stuff, and then we'll go. And so they start moving towards the door. They made sure a couple things were tended to. They turned down the wood stove because they had it wide open, and they're just because they had the door open a little bit up until just moments before. So as they're heading to the door, all of a sudden, bam! The door, something hits against the door. Bam! It was like, he said it was more than 3 times, but he couldn't say if it was like 5 because it happened in rapid succession. But it was very, very hard. It was like something was trying to break in the door, and so they both were stuck in their tracks for a second, and then they both shot at the door at the same time. They didn't say, hey, let's shoot. It was just independently. They boom, boom. They make some shots through the door, and it's just dead quiet. Bruce said at that point he could sense something was watching him, and so he looks over to the big window off to his left, a little bit behind him over his shoulder, and he couldn't make out anything, right? Because the lantern that they had in their hand was low, and it was pretty much mirrored effect. He couldn't really see anything out of it. However, in that mirror effect, he saw across the room, and something was looking in the window, the small one that was broken out. Eesh. Ugh. Bruce said he swung around and lifted his rifle and looked, and when David saw him move, David was the one at that moment that had that lantern. Even though Bruce was going to be carrying it or whatever, it was the banging that caused him to grab it and hold it up. But he swings around, and Bruce said he's looking at this thing, looking back at him as David's holding up the lantern out that direction. And Bruce was like, it was looking right at me, so I was going to shoot it. And he raised the rifle, and click, he had shot all his ammo out. And, the jumble for David to set down the lantern without starting a fire or whatever, and then raise his rifle, the thing was gone. At this point, they're both freaking out. And they decide, okay, well, let's just, Bruce reloaded his rifle. David made sure his was, ready to go. Bruce takes the lantern. David is going to go first. And so David goes out, and Bruce is right behind him. And Bruce has the lantern in his hand, but he's also got the flashlight kind of holding both at once. So he's holding the lantern like this, kind of keeping the brightness of the lantern out of his face while shining the flashlight. And he's got his rifle slung over his shoulder. It's not a very well thought out thing. While David is kind of freely moving with his flashlight, they don't see anything. They back over to the riverbank where the skiff is, and David is like, it's peeking. Excuse me. So at that point, when they get to the riverbank, they're still facing the cabin. The back corner of it on the riverbank side, this thing was leaning out and peeking, and it was real low. And so they're like, almost like it had squatted down and would lean out. And then it stopped doing that because they were both trying to figure out and get a shot on this thing, right? And David said, the next time it leans out, I'm going to shoot the bastard. And Bruce is like, I'll join you. He said he had set the lantern down and had his flashlight ready. And they're not seeing anything now. And then all of a sudden, as David, I believe Bruce said, David was moving his flashlight around, they caught a gleam of eye shine above the roof line, right, on that back corner. So they both raised their, the direction they're pointing the flashlights up a little higher, And sure enough, this thing is looking over the roof and down at them. And Bruce said they did not fire because of how freaking big it was. He said when it was peeking out and kind of leaning out, it looked smaller. But once it had stood up and they saw how tall it was back behind there, he said it was at least minimum 10 feet tall. And the flashlights they were using, while they weren't super modern, they were good. You know, they worked. You know, and he said that it had like a tanned leather kind of colored skin. It didn't, at the distance, which was like, he said about maybe 40 feet ish, somewhere in there. They couldn't make out really good the features, but the eyes just looked black. The eyes looked black, and then when the light would hit them, it would glow with the red, the eye shine. And he said it was freaky because it was pissed. You know, it was mad. Its facial expression, he said, was one of severe anger, really, really ticked off. But he said what was weird is it showed its teeth at one point, but it looked out of place. He said the smile was so, or the showing of teeth was so vastly different from like what you would envision. It was like massive. You know, he said it was like the showing of the teeth was like it just didn't stop. You know, it just because of how large the mouth was. And he said after it did that and stuff, and they kind of snapped out of their like holy shit moment, he picked up the lantern, they got down, they just pulled the anchor. They had some stuff that they had set up over the years to tie off to, you know, but with the anchor line, you know, you wrap it around or whatever like you would a cleat. Anyway, they untied that, they get in the skiff, and they drift away. They killed the lantern as they were drifting away. David would turn on his flashlight every once in a while as they were drifting and shut it off, you know, and they were hearing stuff, so they would both flashlight, you know, the riverbank as they're drifting, because they got roughly a mile. And, you know, it was moving fast enough. They weren't sitting still, but it's not like they were just, you know, going down the rapids either. And they kept hearing brush and stuff moving up on the riverbank next to them. And so periodically David would turn on the flashlight and look, and they wouldn't see anything. They might see some movement in the brush. So they both decide, well, let's shoot the next time we hear that rustling to discourage this thing from fucking following us, you know, because they didn't want it to follow and, you know, all that stuff. So the next time it did it, they both clicked on their flashlights and shot at the same time. And if they didn't see anything when they turned on the flashlight, it was just the brush, you know, back off the riverbank moving. And they said they did that about 2 to 3 times, and then, you know, reloaded, got all, you know, made sure they were good to go, and it finally went quiet. They drifted, he's guessing probably all that when they decided to fire and everything was probably within a half mile of drifting, and then they had roughly another half mile, maybe a little more, before they got to their family's cabin down the way. And he said once it got quiet, they'd still periodically flashlight up on the riverbank, no movement, no nothing. And then when they come into view of the cousin's cabin, just as it comes into view, they saw a light was on inside, and then the light went off. So they're like, oh shit. That was their reference point. So David had both flashlights at this point, kind of hold them up so Bruce could see the riverbank, and they got over to where they wanted to be and stuff, and David tied them off. They went and banged on the door, and they heard their cousin had a shotgun, and they heard him the shotgun and said, "Get out of here," real loud. And they said, "Hey, it's us. And he goes, "Oh shit." Comes and opens the door for him, and it was like, "Hey, that thing was down here peeking in the windows, man," you know, and just told him that basically it came down, it peeked in the windows a couple times and then left. And so he thought nothing of it, and so when they started banging, he thought it was back, you know. They shared everything that had happened, and let's just say the cousin was not happy that they potentially brought it to him. You know what I mean? But nothing else happened. The next morning, they went and extensively, like David and Bruce looked and searched tracks, tried to figure out where it was coming and going from, and it basically, once the tracks they did find reached the inside the trees, it was done with. They couldn't track it anymore. And again, this is 25 years or maybe a little more, 25 years ago. I want to thank Bruce for sharing that. Bruce isn't his real name, but I've known him since I was little, right? And I appreciate him willing to share it, because initially he didn't want to share at all. His brother David since passed, a boating accident actually at night in a skiff. Anyway, but initially he brought it up and shared it with me a few times, just in conversation, nothing to ever go public with. But he was watching a few of the videos. He doesn't like to follow this stuff, because of it. He doesn't like it. He would rather not hear about it. But he decided to allow me to share this, just so people are aware. And I Bruce, if you're watching this, which you said you weren't gonna, but if you do, I appreciate it. And you know my number. You can always welcome the call. And let's see, there was something else. Now, I don't want to butcher the name, but there's some fans of the channel in Australia, of course. And this particular person, was his birthday yesterday or the day before. Now, I think it's Rise, but it might be Rice. I honestly, I don't know the proper pronunciation, but it's RHYS is his name, last name Parker. Doonesboro, Western Australia. I want to say happy birthday. And his buddy Ben that reached out to let me know about it. Thank you, Ben. And let's see. I'll catch you guys on the next one.